garden consultant. She has a business called 6 Seasons Garden Consulting. She's an herbalist and a writer. You may have seen some of her articles in some of the area magazines over the past few years. And Cheryl is going to be talking to you today about the herbs that are used in this area that have been used for a long time by numerous different groups of people. And so please welcome Cheryl.
Well, hello everyone.
Hello.
And you know this is the inaugural tea?
Yes.
It's also the inaugural talk. Just wanted to put that out there. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming out on this kind of dreary day, although we need the rain. I'm glad it held off. It's a pleasure to be here with you today discussing one of my favorite things, and that's plants, and more specifically herbs. You might ask, well, what's the difference between a plant and an herb? What makes an herb a plant or a plant an herb? Well, what do you think of when I say the word herb?
Cooking.
Healing. Yeah, so, well, that's pretty good. Like most people think of herbal teas, but there's also medicinal and there's also household uses. Lots of uses that we're going to talk about today. My herbalism teacher, Rosemary Gladestar, defines herb as any plant that is useful to humans. And that's all the plants on the planet. And humans have been discovering all these uses for herbs for centuries, and they found a way to figure out what's food, what's medicine, and what creates these household products. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to invite you all along on an herbal journey, one specific to our area here in the North Carolina Piedmont. But first I want to remind you that I am a professional gardener and a community herbalist. I'm not a clinical herbalist or a doctor. So this is absolutely not medical advice. It's just some good herbal lore steeped in practical wisdom. And I hope you find it entertaining. Here we go. It's 1825 and you hear a cough coming from the next room. It's little Silas, and he's complaining that his throat is scratchy and tickly. He sounds a bit hoarse too. As a parent, what do? Well, you wouldn't rush him off to carry pediatrics, CVS, and grab some Robitussin and a chloroseptic sore throat spray. You'd either grab the physic chest out of the drawer, or you'd step outside into your garden and you'd pull some chamomile flowers to create a soothing infusion that is also a powerful anti-inflammatory. It can also help induce relaxation and sleep, which is what you want little Silas to be doing if he's crying. Add a tablespoon of honey to further coat Silas's throat and help fight any impending infection. You might place a warm cloth on his throat and chest, and perhaps you might say a little prayer, because that's what parents did in 1825. That's what everyone did, especially in rural areas before the advent of modern medicine. Healthcare was provided for at home, usually by the woman of the house, and most every home had an herb garden right outside the door. A dooryard garden. Easy access at this time was critical. They also foraged the woods for wild-grown medicinal plants. People lived close to the earth and relied on nature for sustenance and good health. Survival depended on knowing which plants could be used as medicine. But how did folks know what to do? Which herbs to use? Where did they get these traditional herbal skills? And where did these medicinal plants come from? Well, that's a fascinating story of the often difficult intersecting of several cultures. Herbalism is an ongoing cross-cultural conversation, one that has lasted centuries and has taken place everywhere globally, but also locally here in North Carolina's kitchens, sick rooms, fields, and gardens. So come on along with me on this interesting rabbit trail. We'll get there, but first some important background to cover, all the way back to Carrie in earlier centuries. Well, we know that European settlers, mostly Scots, Irish, English, and German, have been in our area since the mid-1700s, when Carrie was mostly woods with small clearings for modest homesteads. This was long before the 1850s, when Frank Page and his wife settled here on 300 acres. These early European settlers brought with them their herbal knowledge and their herbs, including lavender, rosemary, and mint. But the landscape they encountered in and around Cary was also rich in biodiversity, like all of North Carolina is, due to its unique climate and geography, from the Appalachian Mountains down through the rolling foothills in Piedmont to the waters of the coastal plains and coast. Cary was dominated by oaks, hickories, beech, wild cherry, and sweet gum, just to name a few towering trees. Ginseng, gaylax, golden seal, pipsissewa, pleurisy root, bee balm, bloodroot, mayapple, wild ginger, and pokewood, thousands of other plants carpeted the woodland floors. But wait, let's go back a little further. Our first human inhabitants here were, of course, the Native American Indians. Very early, the Tuscarora lived in and around Wake County. Other nearby early tribes were the Catawba and the Occaneechi, and the Cherokee lived more to our west. And the history of herbalism in North Carolina would not be complete without the story of the enslaved people brought here by forced migration from their homes in Africa. The ships that carried them were lined with straw on the insides, and there they tucked the beloved seeds of their plants like kola nut, okra, and castor beans, and the women also hid the seeds in their braids. They rooted these seeds in the soil of the New World, far from home, and they also carried with them their own vast herbal knowledge. Some were root workers and healers. In their homeland, they lived in close communion with the earth, believing in a plant's mystical ability to protect. Many wore necklaces of wild licorice seeds as protective amulets. As these three cultures intersected, many plants and herbal remedies were utilized by all, like boneset tea to break fevers, jimson weed for rheumatism, chestnut leaf for asthma. Records also show the common use of snake root, mayapple, red pepper, pine needles, comfrey, and red oak bark. And sassafras tea was a very popular seasonal blood cleanser in all three cultures. Historian Charlotte Bett describes this three-way cultural intersection as a complex history where remedies were borrowed, purchased, and stolen to create this unique overlapping tradition known as Southern herbalism. The herbal tradition we share here in the Piedmont of North Carolina, and yes, right here in Cary, is comprised of the echoing voices of indigenous peoples, European settlers, and the enslaved people carried far from home across the waters. It is these voices that we still hear speaking to us today through the plants, all of our ancestors. So herbs were used in so many different ways and for so many different situations. For brevity's sake, I'm going to focus on culinary, medicinal, and household uses. As you'll see, there's quite an overlap in usage. For instance, lavender is good medicinally to calm the nervous system. I should have had some before my talk. Culinarily, to season baked goods, and a powerful antibacterial and household cleansers. But first, I would quickly like to mention ceremonial uses, including smoking, chewing, and smudging. These were also important as spirituality and religion helped inform the use of herbs to restore health. African healers used elements from religious rituals when preparing medicines, as did Native Americans, while the European settlers often used prayer, which is also a form of ritual, and some would say a powerful medicine. Culinary. Now this one's pretty easy because all of us use herbs every day in our kitchens. Traditionally, herbs used culinary were used for seasoning, cooking, preserving, and also to cover the beginnings of the smells of spoilage. Because they didn't throw food out quite like we did. Do a little oregano, a little thyme. Thought it good. Some common culinary herbs were peppermint, chives, garlic, fennel, rosemary, lavender, and ginger. And these are all healing plants as well, because our kitchens are often our first apothecary. Perhaps the most important use of plants during this period was medicinal, but one big question: how do folks know which plants were medicine and which were not? Well, they learned by trial and error, which, as you can imagine, sadly, does not always work out in their favor. But as the young people say, that's good information. Also, some healers were guided by visions of plants to treat a specific problem. The doctrine of signatures, the idea that God marked plants by color or shape to show humans which ones would be helpful for which illness, was also widely popular. Coined as such by Jacob Berme in 1621, but historians believe it goes back to Hippocrates. For instance, the flower of skullcap, one of the best cures for anxiety, stress, and insomnia, has a strong resemblance to the human skull. Brain-like walnuts, as we know, are really great for brain health. Lungwort's mottled leaves that look like diseased lungs treated pulmonary issues, and wort was just any plant that was used as medicine. Medicinal herbs were prepared in many different ways, as teas or infusions using the flower or leaf, the more delicate parts. Decoctions were used they were simmered longer and immersed in the water longer to pull out compounds out of roots, barks, and berries. Poultices and salves were used in wound care, sprains, skin issues, and bites. And tinctures were prepared with either vinegars or alcohol, and they were made and stored until they were needed. People also used herbs to make household products. Soaps were made from soapwort, which contained saponins, a foaming compound. Rose, thyme, and lavender were used to make lotions and perfumes. And these nice homemade luxuries were also useful as deodorants too, in a time when daily showers were not common. Wax myrtle berries were boiled to create a wax in making candles, and the long, strong fibers in the stalks of nettles was excellent for creating ropes and fabric. And plants for dyeing fabric were especially popular. The most well-known example of plant dye is probably our native blue indigo, false indigo, I should say, because it produces deep blues. It was a major revenue crop for the Carolinas, so valuable, in fact, it was known as Southern Blue Gold. But there were also yellow dyes that came from goldenrod, black or brown came from walnut, and elderberries made a beautiful purple. I have on the table back there, I'll let you know that I have made some inks out of herbs. There's turmeric, which of course is yellow, butterfly pea, which is a light lavender, and then hibiscus flower, which is red. And you're welcome to look at those after when we're dismissed. So now some important uses for some commonly used herbs. There was the European introduced mint. Mentha peperita was useful to treat upset stomach, indigestion, and sore throat. Peppermint also hung in cupboards and pantries to dispel insects. It was also a popular flavoring. However, we also have native mints like mountain mint and bee balm, and they were also used similarly. Sweet gum. Oh, the sweet gum tree. The bane of all of our landscapes. Yes, the prickly, spiky seed balls. But their usefulness was manifold. The resinous sap, also known as storax, has been used medicinally for centuries, going back to 10,000 BC with the Aztecs. And it's used to make salves for skin issues, cuts and scrapes, and cough remedies. All other parts are used as well, the leaves, the seeds, and bark. Native Americans used storax for treating dysentery, wounds, and as a sedative. And they also used the sap of the sweet gum to create incense, and they burned it. Storax was also useful in the making of soaps, fixatives, and adhesives. Ubiquitous then, ubiquitous still today. Sweet gum is literally everywhere overhead and beneath our feet here in Cary. Sassafras grows naturally in the woods all around Cary, and all parts are used in medicine making: leaves, roots, barks, twigs, and flowers. It was a spice and flavoring, a multi-use powerful medicine, and was used for fragrance and soaps. As a member of the laurel family, it's a relative of cinnamon and shares some of those similar spicy compounds. One compound found in sassafras, saffrol, is what originally gave root beer its characteristic flavor, scent, and natural foam. Some of you all may remember that. Before the FDA banned saffrol in root beer and other cooking use in the 1960s, declaring it a carcinogen. One of the most popular uses of sassafras was a spring blood purifier tonic. There's an old Appalachian mountain song. In the spring of the year, when the blood is too thick, there's nothing so fine as a sassafras stick. It tones up the liver and strengthens the heart, and to the whole system, life doth impart. And I promise I won't sing again. Sassafras was also big money. It was an original export from the colonies long before tobacco. Pipsissewa, and that's just fun to say. It grows in the woods and even on old pasture land throughout the area. All aerial parts are used in medicine making. It's an excellent herb for urinary tract infections as it contains a compound, arbutin, that when excreted through the kidneys, acts as an antiseptic on the urinary tract tubes. It is also believed to be effective in treating bladder stones. Its name comes from the Creek Indians, meaning to break into small pieces. It is a powerful anti-inflammatory and good for treating infections, both chronic and acute. It's also a great blood cleanser, tonic, and diuretic. It too is used as a flavoring in traditional root beer recipes. So, as an herbalist, the medicinal use of herbs is of particular interest to me. So come on along through our journey. We're rounding the final curve. Women were the primary healthcare givers, known as healers, midwives, and yard doctors. That's the Appalachian English word for herb doctor, as a yard was the word for herb. The women held fast to traditional plant medicines. They tended to stay deeply engaged with their environment. They passed on knowledge that was grounded in intimate observation of the natural world, but so few documents exist with their stories recorded. We do have a document here that I found in the State Archives of North Carolina that anyone can go to and see the Lucy William Pope papers. So she did have some papers out there, and this is, I don't know if you can see it, but to dye wool yellow, to dye wool black, to dye wool blue. The women shared recipe skills and traditions, mostly orally, as did both the Native Americans and enslaved people, who also used story and myth to explain the workings of plant medicine. There were many books written on medical flora, medical botany, and materia medicas, but they were mostly written by prominent white men. But we mustn't forget the people who didn't get to have their voices heard. As medical care began changing and advancing, formally educated male doctors once again practiced bloodletting, purging, administering poisons, and blistering. But many folks were suspicious of these cures. Even Thomas Jefferson was skeptical of this model of physician care. He observed that nature and kind nursing save a much greater proportion in our own plain way at a smaller expense and with much less abuse. He, like other colonialists, kept a physic chest in his bedroom filled with medicine, potions, and remedies. But neither Jefferson nor anyone else could stop modern medicine's swift march to the present. It was around this time that medicinal plants became real big business. By the middle of the 19th century, there were very few herbarium businesses dealing in the medicinal plant trade in the United States. One of the largest ones was here in North Carolina in Statesville and owned by the Wallace brothers. It proved a success and very quickly grew into a 40,000 square foot emporium. That's almost an acre in size. They hired renowned botanist Mordecai E. Hyams as a researcher and manager. Hyams formerly worked for the Confederate government during the Civil War, buying roots, barks, and plants for the medical care of wounded soldiers. The Wallace brothers were in business until 1942, and a big business herbalism was. Herbs were shipped all over the world. And as a direct consequence of medicinal plant collecting, entire plant communities were nearly decimated in their natural habitat, among them ginseng and golden seal. Herbal medicine moved from dooryard gardens to big-time profitable businesses. Back in Cary, around 1869, our first doctor, Dr. C.F. Dowd, arrived. He was followed by Dr. Waldo, who charged $1 for local visits and $1 per mile for country visits. And he also built Cary's first drugstore. Most patients around this time were dying of cholera, typhoid, meningitis, and pneumonia. Dr. Waldo's old home place still stands. Today it's south of its original location and serves as the bridal suite for the Maiden Inn. Another well-known hometown doctor, Dr. Templeton, moved to Cary in 1885. His pocket-sized books filled with medical remedies and patient accounts are housed in the North Carolina archives. He took copious notes about administering chloroform to women in labor, antitoxin for suspicious throat, and treating all manner of other illnesses. Medical technology and scientific discoveries kept arriving in the Piedmont. Perhaps, maybe, I kind of wonder if all of this rich medical history helped bring about the arrival of the Research Triangle Park and the advanced biomedical and pharmaceutical industries there. Because while many practices and remedies fell by the wayside, so many more were rigorously researched and adapted by modern medical science. From the salicin in willow bark, we got aspirin. The shikimic acid in sweet gum is a precursor to the active ingredient in the antiviral drug Tamiflu. And the bark of the yew tree played an important role in cancer treatment. But all things do ebb and flow, and traditions tend to come back into popularity in cycles. So remember, after years of very little herbal plant use, perhaps only within tight-knit ethnic communities or rural communities, there was a resurgence of herbal medicine in the 1960s as the counterculture and back-to-land movements gained popularity. Herbalism has always been the people's medicine. My hope today is that you take something away that's useful from our time together. I hope you understand that herbal medicine was both nothing special and everything of utmost importance. Herbs were woven into the fabric of people's everyday lives, guided by observation and tradition. Herbalism isn't dramatic, daring, or thrilling, unless, of course, you are Claire on Outlander. We have Jamie there to help with that. It is practical and enduring, passed down through generations, and at its core, herbal knowledge connects people to the land, to their land, and to their place, wherever they may be. I especially hope you will have a new appreciation for our wonderful diversity of local plants and the many uses they had historically and still have today. I hope you get curious about that dreaded daffodil in your lawn, or those awful spiky sweet gum balls that prick our children's bare feet, and when we step on them we twist our ankles. Maybe make a cup of relaxing chamomile or bee balm tea and think about all of the plants that we so often take for granted. Those weeds were life-saving and life-enhancing necessities for the survival of our ancestors, right here in the Piedmont and also abroad. I'd like to end with this quote by Hilda Lale in the introduction to A Modern Herbal by Maud Greaves in 1931, and I do have those two books back there. Lale writes, "Surely it makes a garden more romantic and wonderful to know that wallflowers, irises, lupins, delphiniums, columbines, dahlias, and chrysanthemums, every flower in the garden, from the first snowdrop to the Christmas rose, are not only there for man's pleasure, but have their compassionate use in his pain." So these are just a few of the resources that I used. I actually used probably about 30 more, and that's just the books that I had. There's so much, like I said, I really used the North Carolina archives and the wonderful book that we have about Cary here, around and about Cary. Adam, is that it? Around and about Cary. Oh, I have it up there. Okay. And even like, there was a lot more information on like the Mordecai House in Raleigh. So there was just so much to find out there if you're interested. Questions, anyone?
That's why I love this, and I've always been interested in herbs. And I wondered, You touched upon this, I think, in the beginning of the lecture about besides the health benefits, that there are psychological benefits, emotional benefits. And I wondered, have you ever heard about, well, two things I'll mention is that the scent of rosemary brings back memories?
Yes.
Yes, I never knew that.
Yes.
And that peppermint, I think, improves your mood. Peppermint will, I don't know if you want to call it like lifting depression, but will definitely improve your life.
Yeah, because each of these plants have what they call like an energetic imprint.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's when you get into the energetics of plants. So peppermint, the mint family, that's what it does. It's more uplifting. Some of them are more tonic, like the sassafras is more, for tonic use, for good health.
Digestion.
Yes. So they each have a different energetic, but definitely the peppermint and the rosemary. There's been a lot of research on the rosemary in memory.
Yes, it's fascinating.
Yes.
It's an amazing root regardless. So much.
Yeah, it's also there's a lot of overlap. Like I touched on that. There's a lot of overlap. It's really hard to pinpoint one thing because they can be used so much. They're wonderful. I mean, the plants are wonderful.
First, before my question, Cheryl, I just want to say what a marvelous job you did. As a historian, I really appreciated how you brought people into the equation of plant life too, right? And bringing those things together. But I want to ask you about I think you called it a false blue or false indigo or something.
Indigo.
Like, do we see those around anymore? Where do is it
Come
like
to my house. They're out by my mailbox. Yeah, they're pretty common, and there might even be some out in the herb garden.
We've got some in the pollinator garden and the children's sensory garden.
Yes, which that's what I have right here. I wanted to invite you all to visit the herb garden out here. The greater garden is the Amby Kratzer Educational Garden, and the herb gardens are within that complex. I mean, they're everywhere. The pollinator garden, the herb garden, like Chris said, the children's garden where they can smell and touch, and there's rosemary, I believe, or lavender for sure. So, yeah.
Well, Chris, if I get a clipping of that out there, the Cary PD won't come get me, right?
I can hook you up.
Okay.
But Melody, one thing is, it is not what we usually think of indigo really is like grows wild in India. And so that's where if you hear indigo dye, that's like the main thing. But this was also, it is our native indigo as well. False indigo, Baptisia australis, I believe. Is that right, Bill? Thank you. We've got my native plant expert person here. It's like I planted people I know. I bought all the tickets and gave them to you. Yes.
Hey, if I were to ask a quick question, you just mentioned about if we were to go to your house, what plants are growing in your yard and why?
There's a lot of plants growing in my yard. The Baptisia is out by my mailbox, and there's some Amsonia, which I believe the common name is Blue Star. I have a few, right now I have, what do I have? I have roses that are in bloom, but the native plants right now, they have a lot of spring ephemerals. So the ones I mentioned, the bloodroot and some of the trilliums, they're all finished now, but more will come. Right now, honestly, my garden is, because I take care of 12 other gardens, my garden, and now I have a bum knee a little bit, but my garden is not getting as much care as it should be right now. Yes.
You said you made some inks.
Yes.
What do you use your inks for?
So in my spare time, I signed up for a crafts course, a painting course. So it's mixed media journaling is what it is. And in one of the lessons, we made plant inks. And of course, I went a little overboard and made a lot of plant inks because they were so cool. And I use them just in my journal, so like when I was creating paintings. They're really neat because even if when you paint, they fade. They kind of fade into these really pretty, earthy, natural colors. They don't stay real bright, except for the turmeric. Turmeric stays really bright, just like it does on our counters. Yeah, we don't get rid of turmeric. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're like really busy. So if you had like to pick 5 plants to put in a medicinal garden,
Thanks for medicinal.
yeah, like your top 5. Jones 5.
Definitely nettles, echinacea, nettles, echinacea. Help me out, herb people.
What about elderberry?
Elderberry, definitely elderberry. What other kind of tinctures?
Dandelion, mint.
Dandelion is something that I drink dandelion tea every single day. I love dandelion tea. And Rosemary Gladstar, who is, some of you all may have heard of her. She's like the godmother of modern herbal medicine, bringing it back. She says if you did nothing but drink dandelion tea every day, your health would improve.
So how do you make that?
Well, I purchase my herbs.
Oh, okay.
So I do grow some, but usually I buy dry ones from like Mountain Rose, it's an herbal company, or Harmony Farms on Highway 50 near Crabtree Valley Mall. They have a huge selection of herbs. It's a great local place to buy herbs. Chamomile, lemon balm, chamomile. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a slow processor. Anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you again, Cheryl.